Welcome back to Tuesdays with Tim, the podcast that touches on all things related to brain injuries among children and those who've been impacted by my son, Luke. Today, we have a very, very, very special guest, Patrick McEnroe, tennis legend, tennis commentator. Patrick, thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure, Tim. I'm glad you got this podcast up and running. I know it's something you've been talking about for a while, so I'm honored to be on the show with you.
Well, thank you. Before we get started, I want to just read off your tennis accomplishments because I'm sure no one has done this for quite some time. 1988 to 1998, ranked as high as 28 in the world, semifinalist of the Australian Open, quarterfinalist of the U.S. Open, and number 3 in the world in doubles, and won the French Open in 1989. But I think your greatest accomplishment in doubles was when you and your brother John defeated Richard Matuszewski and Tim Siegel in Detroit in 1988. Do you remember that?
Do you remember the score of that match? Because I don't.
I do. It was like 6-3, 6-1, and you guys just toyed with us to make the crowd entertained for a bit more than an hour.
Listen, I loved Richard Matuszewski. You know, he was from Hopewell Junction, New York, by the way, which is not that far from where I am right now. So I passed his town many a times while driving my daughter to tennis tournaments in the last few years. But let me just say this, Tim, because you were known for your doubles prowess, and you were one of the quickest guys out there, not only with your feet, but with your hands. And Richard was a really solid player, but he was much better, I'd say, in singles than in doubles. So I will say that my partner that day was just a little bit better than your partner, if you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I don't know if that's the case because you were one heck of a doubles player. But, you know, we talk about your tennis accomplishments, but I would say that your greatest accomplishment is your wife, Melissa, and your 3 daughters. Tell us about your family.
Well, I've been lucky enough, Tim, to have been married now. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary this past December. I've got 3 awesome teenage daughters. It's been a blessing. You know, we grew up together and we knew each other in grade school way back when. In fact, her brother and I were best friends all through grade school. And over the years, when I was out playing on the tour, Tim, as you know, in my 20s, I was traveling so much. And my parents stayed in touch with my wife, Melissa's parents, because, as I said, you know, we were very good friends as kids. We used to do sleepovers, me and her brother, that is, not me and her. And so they stayed in touch with him over the years. And while I was out playing on the tour, Melissa had started her Broadway career. She was starring in some big shows on Broadway after she finished going to school at Yale. And my mom would always say to me, "Oh, you've got to meet Melissa. You know, she's great. She's amazing." And my mom has set me up on not a lot, but a few dates over the years, none of which went particularly well. But this one went pretty well, and I'd had my shoulder surgery, my first shoulder surgery in '96, which put me off the tour. So suffice to say, I looked her up, and I actually went to see her brother's show downtown at a club in New York City. I thought, well, maybe Melissa will be there. She was. That was probably 27, 28 years ago. And we've been together ever since. So she does her thing as a singer and as an actress. I do my thing in the tennis world. And we've managed to support each other and yet, you know, continue to do the things that we love to do. And also, you know, raise some pretty solid daughters along the way.
Well, you're very blessed for sure. And the tennis world is very blessed to have you as a commentator on ESPN. You've done the Grand Slams. And, you know, I don't want to just build you up because you're talking to me right now, but I've talked to so many of my friends and those in the tennis world that just feel like you are the best tennis commentator out there. Tell me about how that got started and how much you enjoy being on that side of it.
You know, I actually first started doing it, Tim, when I was still playing on the tour. And I would go over to Europe and play. And in those years, there was a guy by the name of Bill Threlfall, who was a commentator, and he worked at Wimbledon for many years. He was very, very English, very traditional. I used to listen to him when I was in Europe playing in tournaments over there. And he used to mesmerize me. He's just great with language and with words. And in those years, at many of those tournaments, Tim, there was just one commentator. So they would often ask current players to come up and, do a match or do a set here or there. So I got the opportunity to do it a couple of times. I loved it. I thought I was reasonably good at it, right from the start. And when I had my surgery on my shoulder that I mentioned a moment ago, ESPN was sort of in the process of looking for somebody to come in and help with their team. They had Cliff Drysdale and Fred Stolle, who were a legendary team, and Mary Carrillo was there for a time as well. And so I sort of got my start working with those guys, being the sideline guy, going to do the ATP finals while I was trying to recover from my shoulder surgery. So I got a taste of it for about a year or two. And when it became apparent that after my second shoulder surgery that it was going to be tough for me to get back to a level where I could really make a living playing tennis, I thought, well, this looks like a great opportunity. ESPN was ready to hire me, essentially full time or as full time as you can be covering tennis. So that's what happened. And then I ended up kind of, getting my start alongside Cliff Drysdale, who I consider, not only a great friend and mentor, but almost like a older brother, sort of father figure to me, who really showed me the ropes in the television business. And, I've been with ESPN now, believe it or not, Tim, for about 27 years working for ESPN. So it's been awesome, to have the chance to work with my brother the last, say, 10 years or so has been amazing too. So they've, given me so many opportunities over the years. So I love it. It's a huge passion of mine to keep doing it. And as I tell people all the time, it sure beats working for a living.
Well, you are so good at it, and I enjoy when you're on TV and texting with you about what's going to happen in the next match, or it's just exciting. And you've done such a terrific job. My podcast, Tuesdays with Tim, I interview parents who've had children with brain injuries, therapists, nurses, doctors, and I talk about what their role is to help children with brain injuries and the parents that have dealt with things. But I also talk to people like you, those who have been impacted by my son, Luke. How has Luke's story and Team Luke Hope for Minds impacted you?
Well, it's been incredibly inspirational, heart-wrenching, heartbreaking at the same time. But you and Luke and your family were able to, take a dire situation and turn it into something extremely positive for so many people. I mean, you and I go way back, and you telling me about your drives to Dallas and back, and pushing them along when you ran the marathon or the half marathon, whatever it was, is just just amazing. And you think about all that he had in front of him, right? As a great baseball player and just a young kid, growing up, and this horrendous thing happened. But you and him were able to turn it into a positive for the world, and continue to do that. So he's obviously inspired, not just people like us in the tennis world, but people from all different backgrounds. And as you said, what you're doing with your foundation to help other parents that have gone or going through things that you and your family went through is really amazing, because there's a lot of people that have had, these types of situations happen. So when they know there's someone out there that's gone through it, that's someone that can support them and also inspire them, that there's, I don't need to tell you, I'm sure you wondered how many, how could this happen to me and to, my son? And it did. And you managed to find a way to turn something that was extremely difficult into a positive, not just for yourself and your family, but for a lot of other people.
Well, thank you for those kind words, and I think it's what has helped me is certainly my family and my friends and people like you in the tennis world that continue to think about Luke and pray for Luke. And it's my goal and my mission to help families, but also to keep Luke's legacy alive. And people like you have helped me do that. And, March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. And you may not remember this, but you came to Lubbock, Texas, early March and of 19, I want to say 19, excuse me, I can tell you exactly when it was, 2003. And the reason I know that is because 333, the day after you were here, my daughter Alex fell off a horse and fractured her arm. And the number 3 resonates with us so much. It was Luke's favorite number. And every time I see the number 3, and those that see the number 3 think about Luke. And so I just want to thank you. Even back then, supporting Texas Tech tennis and doing a clinic for us, coming to Lubbock meant the world to me.
Well, you know that, I remember that well because you and I got to spend some time together. I got to see, the impact you were having on the school and the community. And also I got to, spend some time with Coach Knight. So him and his son, which they were there running the basketball program. So I'll never forget that moment. We went into the locker room, into his office, and I think he was watching some tape from the night before when Texas Tech blew a lead, and it was one of those real important games because they were on the bubble, I think, to get in the tournament, and they missed a bunch of free throws down the stretch. So suffice to say, Coach Knight wasn't too pleased, but it was fun to meet with him, and I remember one of the first things he said to me was, because I believe I had recently taken over. I think I was a couple years into my Davis Cup captain position. And he said something to me to the effect of, how come these top guys don't play on the Davis Cup team? And at that time, I think he was referring to Sampras and Agassi, although Agassi played, Davis Cup for many, many years. And I said to him, well, how come, Shaq didn't play on the Olympic team? Because they had just had the Olympics and a couple of the big NBA players didn't play. So I think he took that to heart in only the way that Coach Bobby Knight could, if you know what I mean.
I do. And that was quite a few minutes, wasn't that? One last question, and it's about tennis. I follow the sport much closer this year than I have in the last 9, because after Luke's accident, I sort of got away from tennis. I haven't really hit many tennis balls in the last 9 years. I feel like I need to get back to that. That was my life for so long. You and I, grew up and we played against each other, Stanford versus Arkansas, and all those tennis days. I need to get back to it. But I do follow it. I watch it, and former player of mine, Gonzalo Escobar, has done well on the doubles tour.
Oh, yeah.
But
Really
I enjoy watching it now. And give me your take a little bit. We sort of anointed Alcaraz as winning X amount of Grand Slams, but we have Jannik Sinner, who just won the Australian Open, and of course Djokovic, Medvedev, Zverev, all these guys. Kind of fill me in on what you think will happen in the next couple of years.
Well, first of all, let me say that I remember, a pretty intense conversation that you and I had a couple of years ago, where I, told you that I thought you should get back to tennis. And I know that's very hard for you because of all your memories, but I'm glad to hear that you're sort of dipping your foot in the water a little bit, and all in due time. When you'll be ready to go back, and we in the tennis world will obviously support you and love to see you back out there. As far as pro tennis at the moment, I think it's in a great position. Djokovic is, to me, without a doubt, the greatest of all time. If you just look at his record and the numbers, hopefully Nadal will still be able to play for another year or so. And then you've got these younger guys, particularly, as you said, Alcaraz and Sinner, that are just phenomenal players. And I remember watching them up close and personal, Sinner versus Alcaraz 2 years ago at the U.S. Open. When Sinner had a match point, Alcaraz ended up winning it in 5 and then won the tournament, to win his first major. And I remember watching the points. Literally, I was right courtside doing the match. And I couldn't believe the tempo and intensity of point after point, rally after rally. And I said to myself, this is where the game's going. These guys are hitting balls on the full stretch or full slide in many situations, and not just hitting it back defensively, but hitting it back with interest and hitting it back, aggressive shots sort of on the dead run. We were used to seeing Djokovic and Nadal and Federer, play this amazing offensive tennis and then also be able to defend the court. But these guys defend the court almost with offense. Now, Djokovic has been able to stay with these guys and continue to improve his game which is incredible, in his 30s, so that he's still right there. But I think that's that's where the game is going. And in some ways, these younger guys have already surpassed, the few guys you've mentioned. You put Zverev in there, you put Tsitsipas, you put, Medvedev's at the top of the heap when it comes to that generation. He's still right there. But if, there's some younger guys that are going to come up. Maybe you saw this kid from Brazil, play down in South America. I think he's 17 or 18 that just absolutely clubs the ball. So you're going to see guys like that, more athletic, rangy, hit the ball big off both wings and can move and play offense and defense on the run. So I think men's tennis is in a great spot because you've got this really cross-generational thing happening across quite a few generations. We've also got a stable of really good American male players, led by Fritz and Tiafoe and Tommy Paul, and now, Ben Shelton making his move. Korda, I think, is extremely talented. This young kid, Mickelson, may end up being the best of all of them. The question that I get asked, Tim, all the time is, can any one of those Americans win a major? That's going to be difficult because of how good those guys at the top are. But it's a lot of fun to watch. I'm very proud of the years I spent with the USTA and the team we put in place there that I think put the wheels in motion to help these guys that are now in the top 20 in the world. Certainly didn't do everything. That was mostly up to them and their coaches and their families. But I think we were able to really help them, get on the right path. So I'm in touch with a lot of my colleagues, some of whom you know well, Jay Berger, Jose Higueras, and guys that we all worked together for many years. So I take a lot of pride in the work that they did to put those wheels in motion, and now I think we're seeing the fruits of that labor, and hopefully one of those young players can step up and win a major or two in the next few years.
Well, speaking of majors, the last American to win a major, of course, was Andy Roddick at the U.S. Open, and Andy will be coming to Lubbock on April 3rd for our big spring event, and looking forward to that. And Patrick, I just want to finish by saying how much I appreciate your friendship and what you do in the tennis world, and how much Luke meant to you, but also continues to mean to you and to your family. And my best to you, Melissa, the girls, and John, and look forward to listening and watching you on ESPN for many years to come. Thank you so much for being here, Patrick. I really appreciate it.
Kim, you keep up the good work, and keep hope and faith alive, as I know you do. And thank you for all you do.
Take care.